That click you just made? Your brain started at 350 milliseconds before you decided to. The choice to watch this video was already in motion before you arrived. That's not philosophy, that's neuroscience. Right now, your senses are processing approximately 11 million bits of information per second. Your eyes alone are taking in 10 million. Your skin registers another million. Ears, taste, smell, hundreds of thousands more, flooding into your nervous system every single second you exist. But here's the thing, only about 16 bits per second ever reach your conscious awareness. That's a compression ratio of roughly 700,000 to 1. Your conscious mind, the thing you call you, is experiencing 0.015% of reality. This video is about what happens to the other 99.9985%, where it goes, what it does with it, and why the you that thinks it's in charge isn't. Ready? Let's do it.
This is an artificially aware original production.
The implications are genuinely disturbing. By the end of this, you'll understand why your brain makes decisions before you do. Why your conscious mind is essentially a press secretary, inventing explanations for things it didn't cause. And why the self you experience is something like a computer desktop, useful, functional, but not remotely close to what's actually happening inside the machine. We treat consciousness like it's the CEO, the executive, the one running the operation. But the science suggests something far stranger. Consciousness is more like a spokesperson who's always the last to know. Your conscious experience, everything you think of as your mind, is the tip of something vast. And that something vast is making decisions, processing the world, and running your life. The tip just gets the memo afterward and assumes it was in charge all along. We're going to look at the experiments that measured exactly when you decide things, and found something deeply uncomfortable about the answer. In 1998, Danish science writer Tor Nørretranders published a book that synthesized decades of research in physics, neuroscience, and information theory. He called it the user illusion. What he revealed is what this video is about. But to understand it, to really grasp what consciousness is and isn't, we need to start somewhere unexpected, with a thought experiment from 1867. About a tiny demon, sorting molecules, and accidentally revealing something profound about the nature of information itself. What Maxwell's demon discovered, and what took physicists another century to fully understand, is that the important thing isn't gathering information, it's throwing it away. And that single insight explains why you can only remember 16 bits of the 11 million you just processed. James Clerk Maxwell was one of the greatest physicists who ever lived. His equations unified electricity and magnetism. His work predicted radio waves before anyone detected them. But in 1867, he proposed something stranger than any equation, a thought experiment that would haunt physics for over a century. Imagine a container filled with air, divided into two chambers by a wall with a tiny door. The air molecules are bouncing around randomly, some fast, some slow. This randomness is temperature. Hot things have faster molecules on average, cold things have slower ones. And when you mix hot and cold, you get lukewarm. Energy spreads out. differences disappear. This is entropy, the universe's tendency toward sameness, toward equilibrium, toward what physicists grimly call heat death. Now imagine a tiny being. Maxwell called it a finite being. His friend Thomson later named it a demon, stationed at that little door. The demon can see individual molecules. When a fast molecule approaches from the left, the demon opens the door and lets it through to the right. When a slow molecule approaches from the right, the demon lets it through to the left. Slow molecules from the left, door stays shut. Fast molecules from the right, shut. After enough sorting, all the fast molecules are on one side, all the slow ones on the other. One chamber is now hot, one is cold. A temperature difference has been created from uniformity. And the demon did no work. It just opened and closed a massless door. It gathered information about each molecule and used that information to sort them. This seems to violate the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is supposed to always increase. Differences are supposed to disappear, not appear. Yet here's a way to create order from disorder, just by being clever enough, just by knowing enough. Maxwell's point was subtle. He wasn't saying the second law was wrong, he was saying it was statistical. It applies to beings like us who can't track individual molecules. If you could track them, if you had perfect information, you could seemingly reverse entropy. The second law isn't about physics, it's about ignorance, our ignorance. So the question became, is there something that prevents even a perfect demon from winning? Is there a hidden cost to knowing? For over 60 years, physicists thought they had the answer. Leo Szilard argued in 1929 that measurement itself must cost energy. To see a molecule, to know where it is and how fast it's moving, you have to interact with it. That interaction creates entropy. The cost of knowing balances out any gains from sorting. Demon exercised. This was accepted as gospel for half a century. It appeared in textbooks. It seemed elegant and final. It was also wrong. In the 1960s and 70s, physicist Rolf Landauer at IBM started asking uncomfortable questions. Measurement doesn't have to cost energy. You can design measurements that are thermodynamically reversible, that don't generate entropy. Information can be copied essentially for free. So where's the demon's hidden cost? Landauer found it, and in 1982 his colleague Charles Bennett proved it rigorously. The cost isn't in gathering information. It's in erasing it. The problem, the demon has to remember what it measured. Every molecule it sorts, it has to record, fast or slow, let through or not. Its memory fills up. Eventually, to keep working, it has to erase old measurements to make room for new ones. And erasing information, destroying it, forgetting it, that's what costs entropy. That's what generates heat. That's what makes the whole scheme break even at best. Bennett put it beautifully. We pay to have newspapers delivered, not taken away. But for the demon, yesterday's newspaper takes up valuable space, and the cost of clearing that space neutralizes any benefit. The demon doesn't drown in ignorance, it drowns in knowledge. It remembers too much, and forgetting is expensive. This seems like an obscure point about theoretical physics. It's not. It's one of the most profound insights of the 20th century, and it cuts straight to the heart of what your mind is doing. The shortest correspondence in recorded history happened in 1862. Victor Hugo had just published Les Miserables and gone on holiday. Unable to bear the suspense about how his book was selling, he wrote to his publisher. The entire letter consisted of a single character, a question mark. His publisher's complete reply, an exclamation point. 10 bits of information total, and yet complete communication. Hugo knew his book was a success. The publisher knew Hugo was satisfied. Everything that mattered was transmitted. How is this possible? The information content was nearly zero, but the meaning was total. Because meaning doesn't live in the information you transmit. It lives in all the information you didn't transmit. The years Hugo spent writing, his anxiety about public reception, the shared context between writer and publisher, everything that was processed, considered, and then thrown away to arrive at that single question mark. Tor Nørretranders coined a term for this, exformation. It's the opposite of information. Information is what's present in a message. Exformation is everything that was discarded to create that message. The mental work behind the words, the processing that happened before expression. Think about what happens when you say something as simple as, "I love you." 3 words, maybe 20 bits of information. But depending on who says it and to whom, and after what history, those 20 bits can carry the weight of years. A lifetime of shared experience compressed into 3 syllables. The words aren't the meaning. The words are a pointer to the meaning. The meaning is everything you threw away to arrive at those words. This is what makes a message deep. Not how much information it contains, but how much information was processed to create it. How much was considered and discarded. How much exformation stands behind the information. Here's a more mundane example. You're at the supermarket checkout. 23 items get scanned. The total is $27.80, which contains more information, the itemized receipt or the total. The itemized receipt, obviously. There are countless combinations of products that could sum to $27.80. You can't reverse engineer what's in someone's basket just from the total. But the total is what matters. To the cashier, to the transaction, to you reaching for your wallet. All that item-level information gets processed and then deliberately discarded. What remains is what's relevant. Calculation is the discarding of information. You throw away everything except what you need. And here's where Maxwell's demon and Victor Hugo's letter connect to your brain. This is what consciousness does. All day, every second. 11 million bits come in. 16 bits make it to awareness. The rest gets processed and discarded. What you experience as consciousness isn't the information. It's the result of throwing almost all the information away. Your awareness is the total, not the receipt. The question mark, not the years of writing. The sorted chambers, not the memory of every molecule. Consciousness is what remains after the discarding. It's made of exformation. Let's get specific about those numbers. Because they're not metaphors, they're measurements. In the 1950s and 60s, researchers started applying information theory to human perception. They wanted to know, if we treat the human sensory system as a communication channel, how much data flows through it, and how much reaches conscious awareness. The results were consistent and consistently shocking. Your eyes process roughly 10 million bits per second. That's the information contained in the light patterns hitting your retinas, the signals traveling down your optic nerves, the processing happening in your visual cortex. 10 million bits every second. Your ears handle about 100,000 bits per second. Your skin, all that touch and pressure and temperature data, another million. Taste and smell together, a few 100,000 more. Total sensory bandwidth, approximately 11 million bits per second flooding into your brain. Now, how much of that becomes conscious experience? The psychologist George Miller identified what he called the magical number 7 plus or minus 2 in 1956. We can hold about 7 chunks of information in working memory at once. That's why phone numbers used to be 7 digits. That's why you can remember a short list, but not a long one. German researchers Kupfmüller and Frank went further. They calculated the actual bit rate of conscious experience. Their methods differed. Kupfmüller measured performance on tasks. Frank calculated from the minimum perceptible moment of time, but their conclusions converged. Conscious bandwidth, somewhere between 16 and 50 bits per second. Let's be generous and say 50. 50 bits per second out of 11 million. That's the bottleneck. That's the funnel your entire experience of reality squeezes through. Here's another way to see it. Below about 16 frames per second, you see flickering images. Above 16, you see smooth motion. There's a minimum moment of conscious experience, roughly 1/16 of a second. You can't perceive anything shorter than that as a distinct event. 1 bit of information per moment. 16 moments per second. 16 bits per second of conscious experience. The rest, the other 10,999,084 bits per second, gets processed. It affects your behavior, it shapes your responses, but you never see it. Try this. Close your eyes for a moment, then open them for just a split second, a single blink, and close them again. Now with your eyes closed, try to recall what you saw. You'll notice something strange. You captured far more than you consciously registered in that instant. You can scan the afterimage, noticing details you weren't initially aware of. The lamp, the book, the shadow in the corner, they were all there. Your visual system processed all of it. But your conscious attention could only land on one thing at a time. Consciousness is slow. It takes time for awareness to read what the senses have already captured. Now try another experiment. Close your eyes and listen. Really listen. How many sounds are present right now that you weren't noticing before? The hum of electronics, traffic outside, your own breathing, the creak of the building, they were always there. Your ears were processing them continuously. You just weren't conscious of them until you directed your attention there. This is the cocktail party effect. You're at a noisy gathering, focused on one conversation. Someone across the room says your name. You hear it instantly, even though you weren't listening to that conversation. How? Because your brain was listening to everything, all the time. It processed every sound in the room. It just didn't bother your consciousness with most of it, until something relevant emerged. What does this mean for communication? When you speak, you're compressing an enormous amount of mental activity into roughly 50 bits per second of language. All your thoughts, associations, memories, intentions squeezed through the narrow pipe of words. When someone listens, they receive those 50 bits and decompress them back into their own mental associations, their own thoughts, memories, interpretations. Nørretranders calls this the tree of talking. Two vast processing systems, each handling millions of bits internally, connected by a thin channel that carries almost nothing. The words aren't the conversation. The words are the narrowest part of the conversation. The real action happens in the trees on either end, in the compression before speaking, in the expansion after hearing. This is why great conversation feels like more than the words exchanged, because it is more. The words are triggers, pointers, launching pads. What they launch is internal, invisible, and massive. It's also why words always feel inadequate for deep experiences. You take in 11 million bits of a sunset, a piece of music, a moment of connection. You try to describe it, maybe 50 bits per second come out. The compression ratio is obscene. No wonder we fall silent in the presence of the profound. The implication that matters. Most of what you experience, you can never share. You're taking in 11 million bits per second. You can output maybe 50 through language. Even if you talked continuously for your entire life, you couldn't describe 1 second of full sensory experience. We are each locked in a private processing system, connected to others by a channel so narrow it might as well be a whisper across a canyon. And yet, we communicate. We understand each other. We share experiences, build relationships, create culture. How? Because we're not transmitting raw data. We're transmitting compressed pointers. And we trust that the other person's decompression, their own 11 million bits of processing, will arrive somewhere similar to where we started. Communication works not because we share information, but because we share the process of throwing information away. We compress similarly. We discard similarly. The Exformation matches up, even though only a sliver of information crosses the gap. But there's a deeper strangeness here. If your brain processes 11 million bits and only 16 reach consciousness, what's making the decisions about what gets through? What's doing all that processing you never see? And when you consciously decide something, where does that decision actually come from? The answer is uncomfortable. And it comes from a series of experiments that measured the exact moment of conscious decision. What they found changes everything. In 1965, two German neurophysiologists named Kornhuber and Diekey discovered something peculiar. They asked subjects to perform a simple action, flex a finger whenever they felt like it, while measuring electrical activity in the brain via electrodes on the scalp. They repeated this hundreds of times, averaging the results to filter out noise. What emerged was a distinctive electrical signature they called the Bereitschaftspotential, the readiness potential, a buildup of activity in the brain's motor regions that preceded every voluntary movement. The strange part was the timing. The readiness potential didn't begin a few milliseconds before the action, as you might expect. It began a full 800 milliseconds before, sometimes up to a second and a half. The brain started preparing to move almost a full second before the finger actually flexed. This raised an obvious question, one that would take another scientist, Benjamin Libet, to properly investigate. The question was this: if the brain starts preparing an action 800 milliseconds before it happens, when does the conscious decision to act occur? Common sense says the sequence should be: you decide, then your brain prepares, then you move. Decision, preparation, action. The conscious will should come first. That's what it means to have free will, isn't it? You decide, and then things happen because you decided. But Kornhuber and Deek's discovery made this uncomfortable. If preparation starts 800 milliseconds early, does the decision also start that early? Because we definitely don't experience an 800 millisecond gap between deciding to move our finger and actually moving it. That would be noticeable. That would feel like slow motion, so something doesn't add up. Benjamin Libet designed an experiment to find out exactly when conscious intention appears. His setup was elegant. Subjects sat watching a clock face with a dot that swept around like a fast second hand, completing a full revolution every 2.56 seconds. They were told to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it, spontaneously whenever the urge arose, and to note the position of the dot at the moment they first felt the urge to move. Meanwhile, electrodes tracked the readiness potential in their brains, and sensors recorded the actual muscle movement. This gave Libet 3 timestamps for each action: when the brain started preparing, when the subject reported feeling the urge, and when the movement actually occurred. The results, published in 1983, were disturbing. The readiness potential began about 550 milliseconds before the movement. The subjects reported becoming aware of their urge to move about 200 milliseconds before the movement, and the movement itself was time zero. Do the math. The brain starts preparing 550 milliseconds before the action. Conscious awareness of the decision arises 200 milliseconds before the action. That means the brain is already at work 350 milliseconds before the subject consciously decides to act. The conscious decision doesn't start the process. It arrives late. The brain has already been preparing the action for over a third of a second before you decide to do it. Let this sink in. When you decide to move your finger, your brain has already been executing that decision for 350 milliseconds. The feeling of deciding isn't the cause of the action. It's more like a notification that the action is already underway. Your consciousness doesn't issue the command. It gets CC'd on the memo after the fact. The conscious you isn't the general giving orders. It's the press secretary, receiving briefings about decisions that have already been made elsewhere in the building, and then explaining them to reporters as if they were its own idea. Now, you might object. Maybe the conscious decision happens at the same time as the readiness potential, but we just don't experience it until 350 milliseconds later. Maybe there's a delay in the reporting, not in the deciding. But this objection misses what consciousness is. Consciousness is experience. If you're not aware of deciding, in what sense did you decide? The whole point of a conscious decision is that you're conscious of it. An unconscious decision is just a decision made by your brain, which is exactly what Libet's results suggest is happening. Another objection: don't we react to things faster than this? If you touch a hot stove, you pull your hand back almost instantly, way faster than 550 milliseconds. So how can voluntary actions take so long? But that's precisely the point. Reactions are fast because they bypass consciousness. You pull your hand back, then you feel the pain, then you think, that was hot. The unconscious system handles emergencies. Consciousness arrives after the fact to understand what happened. Reflexes are fast. Conscious decisions are slow. The Libet experiments measure conscious decisions and find that even they are initiated before consciousness shows up. It gets stranger. Libet also investigated how we experience the timing of sensations and discovered something even more disorienting. To become consciously aware of a touch on your skin requires about 500 milliseconds of continuous brain activity. half a second of processing before you experience the sensation. But we don't feel a half-second delay when someone taps our shoulder. Touch feels instantaneous. How does the brain hide this delay? By backdating the experience. Libet found two pathways for sensory information. A fast pathway that reaches the brain quickly but doesn't generate conscious awareness. It just timestamps the event. And a slow pathway that takes about 500 milliseconds to produce conscious experience. The brain uses the timestamp from the fast pathway to label the conscious experience that emerges from the slow pathway. So you experience the touch as happening at the moment it actually happened, even though your awareness of it came half a second later. The brain edits your experience of time. It makes the delayed broadcast look live. You are never actually in the present moment. You're watching a recording that's been edited to hide its own delay. Consciousness is a half-second behind reality, but it lies to you about this. It tells you that you're experiencing now. You're not. You're experiencing 500 milliseconds ago, time shifted and presented as current. Libet himself was troubled by his findings. He didn't want to declare free will an illusion, so he proposed an escape hatch he called free won't. Here's his reasoning. Consciousness may not initiate actions, the brain does that unconsciously, but consciousness might still be able to veto actions. The readiness potential begins at 550 milliseconds. Conscious awareness kicks in at 200 milliseconds. The action executes at time 0. That leaves a roughly 150 millisecond window where consciousness is aware of the impending action, but the action hasn't happened yet. In that window, Libet suggested, consciousness can slam the brakes. It can cancel the action that the brain initiated without asking. You can't start things, your brain does that, but you can stop them. Think of the urge to say something inappropriate in a meeting. The urge arises, you feel it, you suppress it. According to Libet, what happened is, your brain initiated the comment, you became conscious of the urge, and then you exercised your veto in that final window before your mouth opened. This is a very different model of willpower than we're used to. Not the power to initiate, the power to inhibit. Not free will in the sense of authoring your actions. Free won't, the ability to cancel actions your brain launches without asking. Some researchers think even this is too generous. The veto itself might be initiated unconsciously, with consciousness only informed after the fact. We might have neither free will nor free won't, just the experience of having them, delivered on a half-second delay and backdated to look like control. But let's set aside the philosophy for a moment. The raw findings are what matter. Your brain starts preparing your actions before you consciously decide on them. Your experience of timing is edited to hide processing delays. The feeling that you are the author of your actions, that your conscious will is the origin point. This feeling is, at minimum, deeply misleading. Consciousness is not the CEO. It's not even the executive assistant. It's more like the PR department, receiving news about what the company is doing, crafting a narrative that makes it all seem intentional, and presenting that narrative as if it were the original plan. The question now is, who's actually running the company? And what's the relationship between the PR department and whoever is really in charge? So there are two systems. There's the vast unconscious machinery processing 11 million bits per second, initiating actions, running your body, handling the overwhelming majority of what you do and experience. And there's the thin stream of consciousness, 16 bits per second, perpetually late to the party, constructing narratives about decisions it didn't make. Nørretranders gives these two systems names. The me is the whole system. Everything you are, conscious and unconscious, the full 11 million bits. The I is just the conscious part, the narrator, the tiny voice that says I decided and I think and I want. The I is a very small part of the me, but the I doesn't know this. This isn't just philosophy. There's hard evidence that the I confabulates, makes up stories, to explain what the me is doing. The most dramatic evidence comes from split-brain patients. In severe epilepsy cases, surgeons sometimes sever the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerve fibers connecting the brain's two hemispheres. This stops seizures from spreading from one side to the other. The patients function surprisingly normally afterward, but careful experiments reveal something extraordinary about how the conscious mind works. The neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga studied a patient called PS. Because of how vision is wired, you can show different images to each hemisphere by placing them in different parts of the visual field. Gazzaniga showed PS's right hemisphere a snow scene and his left hemisphere a chicken claw. Then he asked PS to point at related images from an array. PS's left hand, controlled by the right brain that saw snow, pointed at a shovel. His right hand, controlled by the left brain that saw the chicken claw, pointed at a chicken. Perfectly logical. Shovel for snow, chicken for claw. Then Gazzaniga asked PS to explain his choices. Here's the thing. Speech is controlled by the left hemisphere, and the left hemisphere had no idea about the snow scene. It only saw the chicken claw, but it had to explain why the left hand pointed at a shovel. PS didn't hesitate. "Oh, that's easy," he said. "The chicken claw goes with the chicken, and you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed." The left brain, the verbal conscious narrator, invented a plausible explanation on the spot for behavior it didn't cause and knew nothing about. It didn't say, "I don't know." It didn't notice its own ignorance. It instantly, fluently, confidently generated a story that made sense of the action. This isn't a quirk of split-brain patients. This is what the conscious I does all the time. It receives information about what the me is doing, and it generates explanations. It confabulates, it tells stories, and it believes those stories completely, because it has no access to the actual causes. Gazzaniga calls this the interpreter module. It's the left brain specialization, making sense of behavior, constructing narratives, explaining actions. The interpreter is very good at its job. It's so good that it never notices when it's making things up. Every time you explain why you did something, you're probably confabulating to some degree. The me did the thing, the I explains the thing. The I assumes its explanation is the cause, when really it's just the best story that fits the available evidence. In the 1970s, computer scientists at Xerox PARC, the legendary research center that invented much of modern computing, were developing a new kind of interface. Previously, using a computer meant typing cryptic commands and understanding how the machine actually worked. They wanted something different, something a normal person could use. What they created would become the graphical user interface, the desktop, folders, files, a trash can, icons you could click and drag. The interface that Apple later brought to the masses with the Macintosh. A researcher named Alan Kay and his colleagues had a name for what they were building. They called it the user illusion. When you look at your computer screen, you see a desktop with folders and documents. You drag a file to the trash. You open a window, but inside the machine, there are no folders. There are no documents. There's no trash can. There's just zeros and ones. Billions of electrical states flipping on and off. The desktop is a simplified fiction, a myth that bears no resemblance to the underlying reality, but that allows you to operate the machine without understanding it. You don't need to know about file allocation tables or memory addresses or binary code. You just need to know. Drag the thing to the trash to delete it. The user illusion isn't a flaw. It's the whole point. The complexity is hidden so you can get things done. Nørretranders proposes that consciousness is your user illusion of yourself. The I is like the desktop. It presents a simplified picture, you deciding, you acting, you experiencing. But underneath there's the me, 11 million bits per second of processing, unconscious decisions, backdated timestamps, confabulated explanations. The I is a useful fiction that lets you operate without having to understand the staggering complexity of what you actually are. Think about what this means for your experience of the world. You feel like you see reality directly. You look at a red apple and experience redness. But red isn't in the apple. The apple reflects light at certain wavelengths. Your visual system processes those wavelengths. Somewhere in that processing, the experience of redness arises. What you experience isn't the apple, It's your brain's simulation of the apple. You feel like you hear sounds coming from locations in space. But sound is just pressure waves. Your auditory system processes those waves and constructs an experience of location. The experience is a useful fiction that helps you navigate. You feel like you decide things, but your brain initiates actions before you're aware of them. The feeling of deciding is constructed after the fact, backdated to feel like control. You feel like you live in the present moment, but you're actually watching a delayed broadcast, edited to hide its own delay. Every aspect of your conscious experience is a simulation, a user illusion. It's not false exactly. It's functional. It works. You can operate your life through this interface, but it's not the underlying reality. It's a dramatically simplified, heavily edited, strategically fictional representation of what's actually happening. Consciousness is depth experienced as surface. Massive processing, presented as simple experience. A whole operating system, represented as a desktop with some folders on it. There's something both humbling and liberating in this picture. Humbling because the I you identify with, the conscious narrator, the voice in your head that says I, is such a small part of what you are. Most of the work happens below the surface, at a scale and speed you can't perceive. The me is vast. The I is a thumbnail sketch, but also liberating because you don't have to consciously control everything. You can't consciously control everything. The I was never designed to run the show. It was designed to interface with other I's, to communicate, to make agreements, to function socially. The me handles everything else. When things flow, when you're in the zone, when performance feels effortless, when you lose yourself in an activity, that's the I stepping back and letting the me work. Peak experience isn't the I achieving mastery. It's the I getting out of the way. The problem isn't having a user illusion. The problem is mistaking the user illusion for the whole system. Believing the I is all there is. Trying to consciously control processes that work better on automatic. Trusting the narrator more than the vast intelligence the narrator is narrating about. The me was running your life before the I developed in childhood. The me will handle your heartbeat, your breathing, your immune system, without the I contributing a single useful thought. The me can ride a bicycle, play an instrument, navigate a complex social situation, all while the I is busy thinking about something else. The I isn't the master. The I is the interface, and a good interface knows its place. So consciousness is a user illusion. The I is a simplified interface for a system too complex to understand directly. The me processes 11 million bits while the I narrates at 16. Decisions begin before awareness. Time gets edited. The narrator confabulates. What do you actually do with this information? The first thing is to stop expecting the impossible. The I can only handle 16 bits per second. It was never designed to micromanage your life. Every time you try to consciously control something, the me handles automatically. You're asking a press secretary to do an engineer's job. The I is good at certain things: language, social agreements, abstract reasoning, long-term planning. It's terrible at other things: complex motor skills, rapid pattern recognition, intuitive judgment, anything requiring more bandwidth than a slow conversation. When you're learning a physical skill, an instrument, a sport, a craft, the I learns by being told. The me learns by doing. You can read about how to ride a bicycle forever. The I will understand perfectly, but you'll still fall over the moment you try, because the me hasn't learned yet. The me needs repetition. It needs hours. It needs to build its own model through direct experience. The I can assist by paying attention, by providing feedback, by setting up good practice conditions. But the I cannot do the learning for the me. It doesn't have the bandwidth. This is why practice works, and why instruction has limits. 10 hours of practice teaches the me more than 100 hours of explanation teaches the I. The me is the one who has to perform. The I is just the coach. For decision-making, the implications are counterintuitive. We're taught that good decisions come from careful, conscious deliberation. Weigh the pros and cons, think it through, trust your rational analysis. But your conscious analysis is working with 16 bits. Your me has been processing the situation at 11 million bits per second, taking in facial expressions, tones of voice, environmental cues, pattern matching against a lifetime of experience. The me's judgment draws on incomparably more information than the I's reasoning. This doesn't mean the I is useless. The I is good at gathering information deliberately, researching, asking questions, seeking out data the me wouldn't encounter naturally. The I can also check the me's intuitions against logic, catch obvious errors, notice when gut feelings might be driven by bias or fear. But the actual integration, synthesizing all that information into a judgment, happens in the me. So the best practice is, use the I to gather, then let the me process. Sleep on important decisions. Take a walk. Do something else. The me will keep working while the I is occupied elsewhere. When the answer surfaces, often suddenly, as an intuition or a sense of clarity, that's the me reporting its conclusions. The I wants to take credit for these insights. It will construct a narrative about how I figured it out, but the figuring happened below the surface. The I just received the memo. For performance, any situation where you need to execute in real time, the I's job is preparation, not execution. Before the performance, the I plans, practices, visualizes, strategizes. It sets up the conditions for success. It helps the me prepare. During the performance, the I needs to step back. The me executes. Any attempt by the I to consciously control the action will slow things down, introduce hesitation, disrupt flow. This is why athletes talk about getting out of your own head. The head they're getting out of is the I. The I is too slow for real-time performance. It can only interfere. The zone, the flow state, peak experience, these are names for what happens when the I finally shuts up and lets the me work. The paradox is that your best performances happen when you, the conscious you, are least involved. Musicians know this. The best concerts are the ones they barely remember because the I wasn't there, taking notes. Athletes know this. The perfect game is the one where they just played. Surgeons know this. Writers know this. Anyone who performs complex skills at high levels knows this. Preparation is conscious. Performance is not. For creativity, the challenge is that the I judges too fast. The me generates possibilities, associations, combinations, wild ideas, but the I immediately evaluates them. That's stupid. That won't work. That's been done. The I is a ruthless editor, and it starts editing before anything has been created. The solution is to separate generation from evaluation. Let the me produce without the I's commentary. Capture ideas before consciousness can reject them. Brainstorm without judging, write without editing, sketch without critiquing. Give the me room to work. Then, later, let the I do its job. Evaluate, select, refine. The I is a good editor. It's just a terrible generator. When you try to generate and evaluate simultaneously, the I's evaluations choke off the me's generation. Nothing flows. Every creative technique that actually works, free writing, brainstorming rules against criticism, sleeping on problems, taking walks, working in altered states, is essentially a way to distract or silence the I so the me can produce. Which one do you want generating your ideas? The I is the interface. It's how you communicate with others, how you navigate social reality, how you make plans and agreements. These are important functions, but the I isn't the whole system. It isn't even most of the system. It's the desktop, not the computer. Knowing this doesn't make the user illusion go away. You'll still feel like the I is you. You'll still experience yourself as the decider, the author, the one in charge. The illusion is built in. You can't uninstall it, but you can stop believing it completely. You can recognize when the I is overstepping, trying to control what the me handles better. You can trust the me more. You can give the me room to work. You can stop expecting your conscious narrator to do jobs it was never designed for. The user illusion is a good interface. Just don't mistake it for the machine. We started with a compression ratio of 700,000 to 1. Now you know what happens to the discarded 99.9985%. It gets processed by the me, that vast system beneath consciousness, running your body, initiating your actions, constructing your experience of time and space and self. Then a tiny fraction gets handed to the I, compressed, interpreted, backdated, edited to look like unmediated reality. And the I calls this consciousness and assumes it's running the show. The I is not running the show. The I is receiving a curated briefing and mistaking the briefing for the world. This isn't a reason for despair. The system works. You navigate the world successfully. You make decisions, form relationships, create things, experience beauty. The user illusion is genuinely useful. That's why it evolved. You couldn't function if you had to consciously process 11 million bits per second. You need the compression. You need the simplified interface. But knowing it's an illusion changes things. You can stop expecting your conscious mind to do jobs it was never designed for. You can trust the larger system you're part of. You can let the me do what the me does well and reserve the I for what the I does well. You can stop fighting yourself, because most of that fight is the I trying to override the me, and the me usually knows better. The self you identify with is the interface, not the machine. The narrator, not the story. The desktop, not the computer. And that's okay. Interfaces are valuable. They let you operate, they let you connect with others. Just don't mistake the icon for the thing it represents. Here's my question. If the I processes 16 bits while the me handles 11 million, what have you been trusting the I to handle that really belongs to the me? Where in your life have you been trying to consciously control something that works better when you let go? I'm curious what this lands on. Drop it in the comments.